Hey guys, in today's video we will discover an incredible story of overcoming and transformation. Cassandra Adler had a near-death experience that completely changed her life and brought stunning revelations about the future, including a shocking warning about November 2024. Before we get started, comment below which city you're watching from, because we love knowing where you're from. Accompany us. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Let's unravel this exciting story together. My name is Cassandra Adler, and I have always considered myself an explorer of the human soul. I'm a photographer, passionate about capturing the essence of what makes us unique, our cultures, our moments of connection, our stories. In the winter of 2021, I headed to Thailand, looking for something that could inspire me again. I never imagined that this trip would not only change my life, but that it would take me to places most people never dream of visiting, including the other side. I have always considered myself an explorer of the human soul. As a photographer, my mission was to capture stories in images, stories that transcend linguistic and cultural barriers. When I decided to go to Thailand in the winter of 2021, my intention was simple: to document everyday life in one of the most vibrant and culturally rich places in the world. I remember setting foot in Bangkok for the first time. The heat was oppressive, but the air was filled with spices, fried sweets, and the pungent aroma of seafood. The sound of motorcycles and the chatter of market vendors created a chaotic symphony. My heart was pounding with excitement as I adjusted the camera to capture the action at a night market. "Are you a tourist or a journalist?" asked a fish seller, holding a huge stingray in his hand. He smiled when he heard me explain that I was a photographer and even posed next to his merchandise. During the day, I explored golden temples, talked to monks, and photographed children playing in narrow alleys. At night, I lost myself in the gastronomy. I was never very careful about what I ate. My philosophy was to try everything at least once. If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. I joked with friends over text messages while devouring grilled octopus skewers and spicy curry shrimp dishes. But there were signs that something wasn't right. Small stitches in the abdomen began to appear on the third day of the trip. They were like needles that came and went. At first, I ignored it. It must be the seasoning or the difference in climate, I thought. One day, while walking through a park, the pain became more intense. I sat on a bench, trying to take a deep breath. A local lady selling drinks brought me a bottle of water without me asking. "You need to rest," she said in Thai, pointing to a shadowy corner. I thanked him with a weak smile, but didn't pay much attention. On the last night in Bangkok, a friend I met during the trip suggested we go to a restaurant famous for its seafood. I accepted, even though something told me to take it easy. I ate so much that when I got back to the hotel, I had to lie down immediately. The pain was more frequent, but I still believed that everything would be fine. When I returned to Portland, I thought the discomfort would go away. My life was a cycle of travel and projects, and I had no time for illness or breaks. However, while editing my photos on the computer, I felt such a sharp pain that I had to stop. It was like something was trying to rip my stomach apart from the inside. I called my best friend, Lila Morgan. "You need to go to the hospital, Cassandra, now," she insisted. Lila had always been practical and direct. Reluctantly, I ended up agreeing. Little did I know that this decision would be the first step on a journey that would change my life forever. The hospital's automatic doors opened, and cold, sterile air enveloped me. The receptionist looked at me with a mix of concern and routine as I leaned against the counter, holding the right side of my abdomen. "I have a lot of abdominal pain. I can't move properly," I managed to say between ragged breaths. Lila accompanied me and took control of the situation. "She needs help now," his voice carried urgency. Within minutes, I was taken to triage, where a nurse asked me a series of questions while attaching an oximeter to my finger and checking my blood pressure. "From 0 to 10, how intense is your pain?" he asked. 10, maybe 11, I replied, through clenched teeth. I was taken to an emergency room where they put me on an IV and started giving me painkillers. For a moment, I felt the temporary relief of the drugs, but concern was evident on the faces of the doctors evaluating me. A tomography was requested to try to understand what was happening. "Initial examinations don't show anything clear," said the first doctor, a middle-aged man with thick glasses. "But we're going to do more tests." Time seemed to drag by as I alternated between lapses of lucidity and an almost feverish state. That's when Dr. Samuel Grant entered the room. He was young, but his expression exuded competence and focus. "Mrs. Adler, I'm Dr. Grant, and I'm reviewing your scans," he began, as he examined the monitor next to the bed. "Your appendicitis is in an advanced stage. There are signs of severe inflammation, and we need to operate immediately. Otherwise, the risk of complications, such as a generalized infection, is high." The words, "risk of death," hung in the air like a storm cloud. I had never had surgery before, and fear took over me. Can I wait? Is there no other way?" I asked, grabbing the sheet. "No, Cassandra," Lila said, holding my hand. "You can't put this off. I know it's scary, but this is your best chance. We will do everything we can to make the procedure a smooth one," added Dr. Grant, with a firm but reassuring tone. The rest happened too quickly. I signed the consent forms with shaking hands and was taken to the operating room. The bright lights of the operating room seemed to amplify my nervousness. An anesthetist explained that I would be unconscious within seconds, but all I could think about was what could go wrong. As the mask was placed over my face, I heard voices murmuring and felt the darkness pull at me. Inside the operating room, everything was initially under control. Dr. Grant and his team worked with precision, but complications began to arise. An artery near the inflamed appendix began to bleed, requiring urgent attention. Suddenly, the heart monitor went off an alarm. My heart stopped. "Cardiac arrest!" someone shouted. Dr. Grant took command. "Adrenaline. Now, prepare the defibrillator." The frantic attempts to revive my physical body were accompanied by something that no one in the room noticed. My consciousness had left the scene. When the operating room lights began to fade for me, I felt an inexplicable lightness. It wasn't like passing out or falling asleep. It was like my mind just slipped out of my body. Suddenly I realized that I was floating above the operating table, looking down. There I was, lying pale and still, with tubes and wires connected to my body. The doctors' voices sounded muffled, as if they were miles away, but I could understand every word. Adrenaline administered, carrying defibrillator, 200 joules. I watched as Dr. Grant pressed the defibrillator to my chest. My body arched from the impact, but nothing changed on the heart monitor. Despite the chaos, a strange calm enveloped me. There was no pain, just a feeling of freedom, as if I was letting go of a burden I had carried all my life. Again, another 300 joules. I wanted to tell them not to worry. I was fine, more than fine. But when I tried to speak, I realized I had no mouth and no voice. My form was not physical, I was just consciousness, pure thought. As I floated around the room, gravity seemed like a distant concept. I felt an upward pull, as if a gentle current was pulling me. Without resistance, I was carried out of the operating room, climbing through invisible layers of existence. It was then that I saw Earth, small, blue, and pulsing like a heart. It spun in a vast void that wasn't exactly dark. The planet seemed alive, a complex organism in perfect harmony. I could see forests breathing, oceans rippling, and creatures moving in sync, even if they didn't know it. That's it. Everything is connected, I thought. Understanding came like a wave, not through words, but through an intuitive perception. Earth wasn't just a place, it was a living being, and I was part of it, just like everyone else. Suddenly, a golden light filled my field of vision, and with it came two figures that seemed to be made of pure brilliance. They had no faces, but I knew they were angels. They radiated a welcoming energy, like the warmth of the sun on a cold day. "Cassandra, you are safe," they said, but not in words. It was direct telepathic communication. "Who are you? Where am I?" "You are in a place between the physical and the eternal," explained the taller of the two. "We are your guides. We have come to show you what you need to understand." The angels took me to an immense space, with no apparent end. In front of me, there were glowing orbs, each emitting different colors. Some were gold, others blue or silver, but they all pulsed with their own energy. "These are realities, entire universes," explained the second angel. "Each one is unique, with its own rules and purposes. The Earth, there," he pointed to a glowing blue sphere, "is a rare jewel. It's a world of learning and growth." I wanted to ask why so many things on Earth seemed disordered and chaotic, but before I could, the angel continued. "The chaos you see is part of the greater balance, but when balance is ignored, there are consequences." Suddenly, the surrounding spheres began to glow more brightly, and a new sight appeared. Empty cities, dry rivers, and people struggling to breathe as thick smoke filled the air. "By what is that?" I asked, terrified. "What can it be if you don't change?" replied the angel sadly. That was just the introduction to what was to come. I was overcome by a mixture of fascination and fear, without knowing that this journey was just beginning. The golden light around me intensified, and the angels guided me down an ethereal corridor that seemed to stretch into infinity. There were no walls or ceiling, but an energy pulsed around us, like silent music that I felt more than heard. Each step, or what felt like a step, was soft and buoyant. I didn't know how, but I trusted them completely. "Why am I here? What does it all mean?" I asked, still trying to understand what was happening. "Because you needed to see it, Cassandra," replied the angel to my right, Elion. His telepathic voice carried an incomparable calm. "See what? The purpose of everything and you." We arrived at a vast space where the floor seemed to be made of liquid light, reflecting the spheres that floated around us. Each sphere was different. Some sparkled like stars, others pulsed with soft, enveloping colors. I was drawn to a bright blue sphere, small but intense, that seemed to vibrate with life. "This is Earth," said Elion, gesturing to the sphere. "She is unique in the cosmos. It's not just a planet, it is a learning field for souls." "Why so much suffering? Why do so many things seem wrong there?" I asked, feeling a heavy heart as I remembered the inequalities, the wars, the environmental destruction that I had witnessed myself. The other angel, Seraphiel, more intense and direct, replied, "Because the earth is a place where free will is absolute. Humanity has the power to create and destroy, but every choice carries a consequence." I was taken to another sphere, larger, golden and pulsating. "This is a different universe," Elion explained. "Each one has their own laws and ways of life, but they all share the same purpose, to contribute to the balance and growth of the whole." Balance. "Everything in the universe is connected, like a symphony," said Elion, with divine patience. "When a note is out of key, the entire song is affected. This is why balance is so important." I looked at Earth again and felt a mix of love and sadness. She looked so beautiful but fragile. What if the balance is lost? What happens? Seraphiel approached, her more intense energy almost making me flinch. "When the balance is lost, there is an adjustment. It's not always easy, but it's necessary. Earth is approaching one of those moments." The angels reached out their hands, and suddenly visions began to form in the space around me. I saw the destruction of forests, animals being forced to live close to humans, and diseases emerging from this proximity. "This is not random," Seraphiel said. "It is a direct consequence of humanity's choices." Then, the scene changed to something darker. Entire cities were deserted as people wore masks to try to breathe through the toxic air. It was like a pandemic amplified, something more deadly and out of control than I could ever imagine. "Is this going to happen?" I asked, my voice shaking. "It is a possibility," replied Elion with gentle sadness, "but it's not inevitable. You still have time to change." "Why am I seeing this? What do I have to do with all this?" "Because you have an important role in the change," Elion replied. "You were chosen to carry a message, not because she is special, but because her life so far has prepared her for this moment." "But I'm just a photographer," I replied. "What can I do about such big problems?" "You'll see," said Seraphiel cryptically. "But first, there is more you need to know." As the angels began to move away, the light around me changed. The ethereal environment became darker, and images began to form in front of me, as if I were watching a three-dimensional projection. Each vision was so vivid and tangible that I felt like I was living in the moments portrayed. The first vision that emerged was of a busy market, similar to those I had visited in Thailand. Wild animals were kept in small cages, stacked on top of each other. The environment was full of screams and strong smells. Suddenly, chaos took over. A group of people began coughing uncontrollably, and the sound of sirens erupted into the air. The vision quickly unfolded, showing crowded hospitals, desperate people trying to buy medicine, and deserted streets in once vibrant cities. "This is the consequence of human choices," said Elion, her voice soft but firm. "When the natural balance is destroyed, the consequences affect everyone." I saw images of entire families being torn apart, of economies crumbling, and of a wave of sadness that seemed to engulf the entire world. "Why does this need to happen?" I asked, feeling the weight of the vision. "No need," Seraphiel replied, her intensity cutting through my question. "But if humanity continues to ignore the signs, this is a real possibility. The scene changed again, and now I saw something completely different. The sky was a reddish hue, and there was an energy in the air that seemed to vibrate. People were gathered in squares, looking up at the sky, as if they knew something was about to happen. November 2024 will be a period of planetary transformation, explained Elion. Physical and spiritual changes will affect humanity. It will be a time of choices. Each human being will have the opportunity to redefine their path. I saw earthquakes shaking cities, seas rising and receding with impressive force, but I also saw something more. People helped each other, strangers coming together to rebuild, to protect each other. Is this part of the balancing process? Yes, replied Seraphiel. Before rebirth, there must be a purification, but during this period, souls will be tested. Love, compassion, and faith will determine each person's future. What about me? Where do I fit into this? Elion approached, his golden light enveloping me like a hug. You will be a messenger. Your experiences, your art, your words, all of these will be a guide for others. Show them what you saw. Help them understand what's at stake. I hesitated, feeling the magnitude of what was being asked of me. But I'm just one person. What if no one hears me? Every action, no matter how small, creates waves, replied Elion. You will never know the full impact of your choices. Just trust. Before I could ask further, one last image appeared. It was a vision of myself, standing in a room full of people, sharing my story. Some were crying, others seemed to absorb every word as if their lives depended on it. The vision disappeared, and the atmosphere returned to that golden calm from the beginning. Now you understand, said Seraphiel, but there's still more you need to see. I felt a mixture of determination and apprehension. I knew my journey was not yet complete. Visions began to fade, leaving me enveloped in absolute silence. It was the kind of silence that didn't intimidate, but invited reflection. Elion and Seraphiel remained at my side, their presence radiating comfort and authority. I knew something important was about to be revealed. Cassandra, Elion began, her telepathic voice soft but charged with meaning. You have not yet completed your journey on Earth. Your life was carefully structured for this moment, so that you could witness and share what you saw. But I don't know how to do that, I admitted, my insecurity boiling over. I'm just a photographer. Who will listen to me? How can I change something so big? Seraphiel stepped forward, her intense energy contrasting with Elion's serenity. You don't have to change the world alone. Each soul has a unique role in the great balance. Your mission is to be a witness, a bridge between what is visible and what is eternal. I remembered the visions I had just witnessed. Chaos, destruction, but also hope and unity. The idea of being a messenger seemed overwhelming, but at the same time, something in my heart began to vibrate, as if the mission was already rooted within me. Suddenly, the environment around me changed again. We were now in a hospital room. In the center of the room, there was an elderly man lying on a bed, his eyes closed and his breathing shallow. Around him, machines monitored his vital signs, which were beginning to decline. This is Mr. Alcott, explained Elion, looking at the man with compassion. Your earthly journey is about to end. Watch. The scene unfolded before me. Mr. Alcott's breathing stopped, and a luminous form emerged from his body. It was his soul, free from all the marks of age and suffering. Two angels appeared to welcome him, their expressions radiating love and patience. Mr. Alcott looked at his body with no sadness, just acceptance. Is it time? He asked, his voice clearer and stronger than had seemed possible moments before. Yes, replied one of the angels. Your mission has been accomplished. Now you are coming home. Tears streamed down my face as I watched the transition. There was something profoundly beautiful and peaceful about the process. For the first time, I realized that death was not something to be feared. It was a return, a reunion. Inspired by the moment, I turned to Elion and Seraphiel. I want to see God. Please, let me see him. Elion shook his head gently. Not yet. Finding God is the ultimate destination, and you have a lot to accomplish before you get to that point. But know this, God is with you, in every step, in every breath. You are never alone. His words were both a promise and a challenge. I knew I needed to go back, even though a part of me wanted to remain in that state of eternal peace. It's time, Seraphiel said, with a firmness that made me take a deep breath. Before I could protest, a force pulled me back. I felt like I was being compressed into something too small to contain who I was at that moment. Suddenly there was heaviness, pain and sounds all around me. "She's back!" I heard someone scream. My eyes opened, dazzled by the hospital lights. There was Dr. Grant, sweat running down his forehead, and Lila, tears streaming down her face. I had returned. Opening my eyes was like being reborn. Everything felt different. Even though I was back in the familiar, sterile environment of a hospital, the fluorescent lights glowed brightly, but they weren't comparable to the divine luminosity I had just left behind. I felt the weight of my body, the pain that seemed to have been numb during my absence. However, along with the pain, there was a clarity I had never experienced before. "Cassandra, you gave us a huge scare, Doctor." Grant's voice was a mix of relief and exhaustion. He approached the bed, checking the monitors around me. "You went into cardiac arrest during surgery, but we were able to revive you. I don't know how, but it's here with us." "I know how," I replied, my voice weak but firm. "And it wasn't just because of you." He raised an eyebrow, intrigued, but didn't ask anything else. Lila, my friend, was next to me, holding my hand tightly. "You have no idea how terrified I was," she said, trying to hide her tears. I smiled softly. "I saw things, Lila, things that changed everything." She frowned, but before she could ask what she meant, a nurse came in, explaining that I needed to rest. As she and Lila left, I closed my eyes, not to sleep but to process. I knew I had crossed a fine line between life and death, and what I found on the other side was more than I could explain in words. My physical recovery was slow. The abdominal pain persisted as my body healed, but something inside me was profoundly different. Each sound seemed clearer, each smell more striking. When I looked out the hospital window and saw the sky, it was as if I were observing a living painting, something I had never noticed before. Experience had taught me that life was infinitely precious, not because of its length, but because of the connection it offered. I remembered the earth as I saw it during my NDE, a living, pulsating organism where every being, every element, played an essential role. Now, more than ever, I wanted to be part of that balance. Leela was the first person I tried to share what happened with. When she came back to visit me on the third day after surgery, I sat carefully on the bed and held her hands. "Lila, I need to tell you what happened while I was there." "There? Cassandra, you were here in the operating room," she replied, confused. "No, my body was here, but I wasn't," I insisted, my voice thick with emotion. And then I told everything, how I floated above the operating table, how I saw the earth from afar, and how I met the angels who showed me universal truths. Lila remained silent as I spoke, her eyes filling with tears. When I finished, she took a deep breath and said, "That's amazing, but also scary. Why do you think it happened to you?" "Because I needed to understand, and now I think I need to share what I saw." After I was discharged, I realized that even the simplest things had changed. The way I walked the streets of Portland, the way I interacted with people, and even the way I looked at my own work had a new depth. Photography would never again be just about capturing images. It would be to transmit messages, create connections. I found comfort in small gestures, a smile from a stranger, the sound of leaves rustling in the wind, and even the texture of the ground beneath my feet. Everything seemed part of a larger, divine system. I spent weeks trying to adjust my life to this new perspective. Friends who previously thought they knew me began to notice changes. My usual restlessness gave way to an almost supernatural calm. I knew my journey had a renewed purpose. There was a mission before me, and although I was still trying to fully understand what it was, I knew it started with one thing: sharing what I learned. As I processed everything that had happened during my near-death experience, my mind often went back to a pivotal moment in my life before surgery, a profound and inexplicable encounter with God years earlier. At the time, I didn't fully understand what had happened, but now it all made sense, like pieces of a puzzle finally falling into place. It was 2017, and I was in one of the most difficult periods of my life. My work as a photographer was stagnant, and my constant search for professional recognition seemed to have turned into an all-consuming obsession. I spent months trying to sell projects that never got off the ground, and to make matters worse, my mental health was declining. I felt isolated and exhausted. On a cold fall night, I sat on the floor of my small Portland apartment, enveloped in an oppressive silence. Tears streamed down my face as I stared into space. "If there's someone out there," I whispered, my voice breaking, "show me I'm not alone. Please." The words came out as a desperate plea, and for a moment, The room remained as quiet as before, but then something changed. A presence filled the room, something so powerful and welcoming that it made my breath stop for a moment. There was no visible figure, no audible voice, but the room was filled with light, not a physical light, but an energy that seemed to radiate warmth and love. It was as if the entire weight of the world had been lifted from my shoulders. Instead, I was filled with something I can only describe as pure hope. A message began to form in my mind, not in words, but in feelings. It was as if God was hugging me, telling me that I was seen, heard, and loved. No matter how lost I felt, I was never alone. As this presence remained with me, I was flooded with images and memories of people who had hurt me throughout my life. Friends who betrayed me, partners who broke my heart, even family members who had let me down. My initial instinct was resistance. I didn't want to revisit those wounds. But then, a clear feeling came over me. Forgiveness wasn't about justifying what these people had done, but about freeing myself from the weight I carried. God was showing me that resentment was a barrier that prevented me from living fully. As this divine presence continued to surround me, I felt a strong pull to trust the flow of life. God did not promise me an easy road or a direct path to success. Instead, the message was clear. The challenges we face are part of something bigger, something that shapes us and prepares us for what's to come. Trust, the feeling seemed to say. Even when everything seems lost, trust. When the experience ended, there was no dramatic moment of departure. The presence simply dissipated, like a sunset giving way to night. But I knew something inside me had changed. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. This meeting was what gave me the strength to continue. It was what sustained me through the hardships to come, and what years later made my NDE even more meaningful. The connection I felt in that moment was a preparation, a reminder that the divine was always with me, even in the darkest moments. After returning to my daily life, with my body slowly recovering from surgery, I discovered that my mind had transformed. Before, my life was a constant search for recognition, to prove something to myself and to the world. Now, after the near-death experience and the visions I had, I realized that my existence had a much greater meaning. I have always been a logical person, looking for practical explanations for everything. But after the NDE, the connection between all things became impossible to ignore. I remembered the vision of the earth as a living organism, where each element played its role in the greater balance. It changed the way I viewed even the smallest acts in my everyday life. I started to reflect on the people around me. In such an interconnected world, even a smile or a kind word could create ripples of impact. Every person who crossed my path had a reason for being there, even if I never understood the full purpose. This new perspective brought a profound humility to my life. One of the most powerful teachings that the angels and God himself had conveyed to me was about forgiveness. Before the NDE, I held resentments, some so old I could barely remember the original cause. I always thought that forgiving meant accepting what was done to me, but now I saw forgiveness as a release, a way to free myself from the emotional weight that was stopping me from growing. One of the first people I reached out to was my mother. We had a complicated relationship, full of unresolved hurts. I called her, nervous but determined. "Mom, I want us to have another chance," I said. "I want to leave the past behind." There was silence on the other end of the line, followed by her emotional voice. "I want it too, Cassandra." It was like an invisible barrier being torn down. Forgiveness was not just a release for me, but for both of us. The biggest lesson I took away from the NDE was the importance of purpose. The angels had been clear. Each soul had a unique role in the great universal balance. Even the simplest actions could be part of something bigger. It made me look at my career with new eyes. Before, I saw photography as a way to achieve recognition. Now, I wanted to use it as a tool to inspire and connect people. I began planning a portrait project that would capture stories of hope and resilience. I visited shelters, nursing homes, and communities facing daily challenges. In each image, I tried to capture not just the faces, but the souls of people. The photos were accompanied by their stories, and I felt truly alive giving a voice to those who were often ignored. I started to value the people around me more. Lila, who was with me in the most difficult moments, became a soul sister. By my side, she encouraged me to share my story. "People need to hear what you saw, Cassandra," she said. And although I was hesitant at first, fearing I would be judged or misunderstood, I realized she was right. Connecting with others became a priority. Interactions that previously seemed superficial gained depth. I asked more, listened more, and offered more of myself. This change has brought not only more meaningful friendships, but also a sense of community that previously seemed impossible to me. My near-death experience wasn't just an isolated event, it was a catalyst for profound transformation. I began to see challenges as opportunities, pain as lessons, and each day as a gift. Most importantly, I began to live with renewed purpose, not just for myself, but for the greater good of everyone around me.